Today I'm going to start making a group of small pieces of work about this sort of size, and I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to make a slab in the way that I normally do, using a rolling pin, which is what I'm going to demonstrate in this YouTube video. The type of clay that I'm going to use is the usual clay that I would use for most of my work. I don't always use this clay. Sometimes I use different coloured clays, like a terracotta clay that this piece is made of, or this black clay. The thing I like about this particular clay body is that it fires to a good white colour like this, and it's got a good texture. It's not too gritty. It's sort of medium coarse sort of clay. And those really are the two things that I'm looking for in a clay. It's the colour when it's fired is important. I either want it to be white or I want it to be a specific colour, and I want the texture to be right. I don't want it to be too smooth. I want it to have a bit of grittiness, but without being too gritty. So I'm going to roll out a slab using this clay that I would normally use. I've got two bags here because I've got a bag of brand new clay from the manufacturer, and I've got some recycled clay that are all the scrap bits that I soak down, put through a pug mill and reuse. I don't like using the reclaimed clay on its own. I find when I roll a slab out with this, it can be a little bit difficult to work with. It's more likely to crack and tear. So what I do is I mix some of this with some of this. So I just cut a little bit of that off. This has been through a pug mill, which is why it's this particular shape, and this is straight from the manufacturer. This clay is called Earthstone Handbuilding Material. So Earthstone is the manufacturer, and Handbuilding Material is the type of clay. So I'm just going to mix these two together. So I just want to knead that I find kneading the clay just helps to get it, moving a little bit. It can be quite stiff when it comes straight out the bag, and as soon as you start just kneading it and getting it sort of mixing it a little bit, it seems to soften up and become more workable. And I'm going to mix the reclaimed clay with the new clay in a sort of equal quantities, so about that much of each. And to do this, I'm going to slice these up. So just pulling a wire through, so I end up with thin pieces, and then I'm just going to mix them together alternately. So one of them. And then I'd probably just do that again, just to make sure that they're mixed properly together. There we go. That's quite a good workout. early in the morning. And then I'm going to roll this out into a flat slab. And I want that slab to go, I'm going to keep that slab on a board this big. So I want the right amount of clay to make a slab that's going to fit onto that board. So I'm just going to estimate what I need for that, which is going to be about that much. So I prefer to use a rolling pin to make my slabs. Well, it's a rolling pin and hands that are the main tools for doing this. I prefer this method to using a slab roller because a slab roller makes very sort of mechanically too precise slabs. So I want it to have a sort of handmade look to it. Even at this stage, I'm thinking about the quality of the finished pot, and the way that the slab is made will affect, in a small way, the visual qualities of the piece of ceramic. So there's still going to be evidence of some of the marks that I make in the surface of the clay when I'm making the slab, that remain in a small way on the surface of the finished pieces of work. So I begin with my block of clay, and I'm just going to use hands at the moment and just press down to begin to thin out the clay. It needs quite a lot of pressure. It's quite good to lean over the clay and put two hands together and just begin to thin it out a little bit. Don't go too far before you turn it over. Turning over the clay is important, because if you keep applying pressure, obviously it's going to get stuck to the table that you're rolling on. And that, I do work directly on the table. I know some people will put some kind of cloth hessian down first, but I just think a wooden surface that's not been cleaned too well, so it's got a little bit of dust on it, is ideal for making slabs. I'm trying to keep the clay fairly even. It's obviously going to have these sort of quite deep marks from the palm of my hand, but I don't want the edge to be thinner than the middle, so often it needs a little bit more pressure in the middle of the clay to make sure that that's thinning out at the same rate as the edge is. And again, just turn it over. And then you get to a point where you can't really do any more like that, and that's when I'm going to start using my rolling pin. And when I make slabs, another reason for doing it like this with a rolling pin is that a slab roller will tend to make slabs of clay that are oval or rounded, and I want to make a slab of clay that's more square, which is going to be more useful for when I'm making my pots. I need to cut shapes that are going to be more rectangular. Even if I'm making round pieces, it will start off with a rectangular piece of clay. So if I'm trying to cut those rectangles out of a round piece of clay, I end up with a lot of wastage. So I want to have a squarer slab in the first place, and I find I can control the shape of the slab much better with a rolling pin. And so what I do is roll it a little bit, and you can probably see that I've rolled it in the middle, and I've left the ends a little bit thicker. So it's beginning to go into this sort of oval shape, but because the ends of the clay are a little bit thicker there, and if I turn it through 90 degrees, I can just roll out the ends, and it sort of pushes those corners out, making a more rectangular sort of shape. And actually, if I just stop there and leave even a little bit of thickness just here and here, I can go back that way and push it out a little bit further. And we can see it's a bit wobbly, but it's more of a rectangle and therefore a bit more useful. And then the other thing that I do to to roll this out or spread it out and make it thinner is just the way that I pick it up and put it down again. I'll pick the clay up, throw it down at a little bit of an angle, and it stretches itself. And it's much easier this way than just using a rolling pin. So it just takes some of the effort out of the process. Putting it down like that, and it just stretches. And I've managed to sort of maintain that rectangular shape pretty well so far. And I'm keeping an eye on the thinness of the clay. So I will, picking the clay up and stretching it is a good way of making it thinner, but it's good then to go back to the rolling pin just to even it up, because just picking it up and spreading it can make it thin, too thin in some places and remain thicker in others. So going back with the rolling pin and just identifying where it's a little bit thick and just spreading it out. So you try and keep it as even as possible. And it's now getting to the sort of thickness that I want, which for making smaller pieces of work like this, or maybe a little bit bigger than this, I want it to be probably about 4 millimeters thick, which is quite thin. And if I don't achieve that 4 millimeters straight away, rolling it now, I might just come back to it a little bit later and roll it a little bit more when the clay's dried a little. And then one last flick, and then I think it's going to be done. So one last like that, and then what I was saying about it fitting on a board, it's exactly that size. So if I just transfer it by picking it up, get my arm underneath one end, hand on the other side, I can move it onto that board. And it's a little bit bigger than I want, so rather than just leave those edges, I'll cut them off now, because while the clay is still soft, then it can go back into the bag rather than in the recycling. So that is how I make my slabs of clay. I think it's a process that's very simple, but it's a process that you need to get right. If you're going to make good slab pots, they start off with good slabs of clay. So I think, although it's simple, I think it's an important part of the process. This is now going to dry a little bit, and the next thing I might do is add a little bit of texture into the surface of the clay. And you can see that on one of my YouTube videos. So I might add a little bit of colour or some grog, some texture into the surface, and then I can start cutting and assembling it into my pots that I make. So I hope you found that a useful process video. That's how I do it.